We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. First story is a story that I have dubbed Forest Child Skeletons, because I didn't really come up with a good title, but let's see if I can come up with a better one now. I'll be like the Crypt Keeper. I'm going to call this story Sticks and Bones. We're going to Vancouver. We're going to Canada. Specifically, we're going to a little forested area known as Stanley Park. Or as I like to call it. No, just joking. We're going to Stanley Park, Vancouver. The year is 1953, and there are two hikers moving. It's funny, because hikers, I don't think I'd ever want to be like a professional hiker, because they always stumble across bodies. Whenever you read these stories about bodies being found, it's like two hikers are in the wood. One hiker was in the wood. A group of hikers. Why be a hiker? This is like just part of... You're hiking to enjoy nature, not to find little skeletons. But anyways, these hikers find little skeletons. And the children skeletons, to be precise. They're not just like adult humans that have shrunk. They're actually children skeletons, which makes it sadder. Bunch of little bones. And then, to make it even more sad, they had like aviator helmets. Oh, like they were playing, like pretending to be like pilots and stuff. They had like little kid clothes. Little helmets. Like, they were probably out, like, being like, nah, this is what I call pod racing. What's that mean? I don't know, but wee! And they're just, like, having fun. And then they died. Terrible. Terrible. Both bodies, too. And so the first thing you would think, well, maybe it was an accident, but both bodies were covered up by a raincoat. So whoever left the bodies there, somebody left the bodies there. It's not like two kids in aviator helmets were running around in the woods. They both tripped on a log and broke their necks and just died. Somebody left them there. When the cops get there, that's the scene. Two little skeletons, two little aviator helmets. So that's heartbreaking. And a raincoat covering them, and a single woman's shoe. Now, obviously, this becomes a big story because, obviously, the age of the victims, plus the mystery of it, like, how did this happen? It's not like two kids fell out of a bus and got ran over. It was like, we got these two skeletons. We got to figure out what's going on. And they're little skeletons, little kid skeletons. So they look at the skeletons, they observe it, and they go, one skeleton's a boy, and one skeleton's a girl. So this was a huge effort. This is back in 1953, if I didn't say that already, 1953. So the police are going basically through every missing case where there is a brother and a sister, or a boy and a girl. They can't find anything. They're talking to people who are at the park that day, and people are like, yeah, I did see like a woman and two boys go into the woods. So then they would try to track down this woman, and she'd be like, oh no, they're right here. Here's Heckle and Jekyll, my sons. Like, every lead was a dead end, but they looked for years to try to solve this case. So they're thinking, okay, these kids probably died. It's 1953 we found the bodies. They're the skeletons. We have this raincoat, this shoe, and these aviator hats. We think the crime probably took place within like a year or two of us finding the bodies. We think that's our goal. So that was kind of where their window was for looking for missing kids. They started going to schools and saying, do you have any kids missing in the area? And people are like, well, we got tardy kids, but we don't really have a boy and a girl missing. This went on for a long, long time. Now, stories were like witnesses would come to the police and they would tell a story, and the cops would be like, that doesn't fit the window that we're looking in. We don't think the crime happened then. Because otherwise, people are going to be like, yeah, two Egyptians were running through the woods. Like, you have to have like a window. But then two things came up. Two things popped up that kind of made the cops go, we probably could have handled this a bit better. In 1998, they do a DNA test. So DNA is now readily available. They do a DNA test. They find out that it's not a boy and a girl. It's two half-brothers. They're both boys, and they both have the same mom. So now the cops are like, every time we investigated a boy and a girl was basically a waste of time. And then, I don't know why it took them so long to figure this out. And then they figured out that the woman's shoe, was only sold before World War II. So now they're like, we really screwed the pooch on this thing. And what's interesting is one of the reports they got when they were looking into this case, a couple came to the cops and said, we were at that park back in 1944. And the cops immediately were like, that's too far back, but go ahead and tell your story. They said, we were at that park in 1944, and we saw a woman, we're just hanging out, hiking, doing our thing. A woman runs out of the bushes, screaming, crying uncontrollably, just runs past them. And they said, we thought it was weird for multiple reasons, not just that an adult woman came screaming out of the bushes. We thought she needed help, but she just kept running. But they said it was also weird because the weather was really bad. She didn't have a coat on. And we noticed she only had one shoe. So, is it possible that they saw the woman who had murdered? Most likely, if they're half-brothers, most likely they were killed by their mother. And that was the woman who was leaving the scene. Did they catch a glimpse of the murderer? Were they there the day those two little boys got murdered? And their bodies just were laid there somewhere in the forest for 9 years before they were discovered? Or was it just happenstance? Was it just she screams through everywhere. She runs to Best Buy with no jacket and one shoe, just screaming. Is it two totally separate events? The thing is, nobody knows. It's still considered an unsolved mystery. Here's what's creepy. Most likely, that woman went on to live a fairly normal life. Went to church, met another man, got pregnant, had another kid. Like, this woman, unless she ran straight off and jumped into a river and they never found her body, this woman most likely reintegrated herself into normal human society. And the whole time she was sitting at PTA meetings, or making cookies for her new kids, or lying on her own deathbed 30 years later surrounded by her family, she knew she left two boys to rot in the middle of the forest next to their aviator helmets. Absolutely bizarre. And nobody else would have ever known or ever guessed in her normal life that she could commit such a barbaric act. She just lived on as those boys were exposed to the elements, slowly decayed, and just became two unknown skeletons lost in the woods. That was a clip from our daily podcast, Dead Rabbit Radio. Dead Rabbit Radio is available anywhere that you listen to podcasts. It's daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime news. If you want to hear the full episode that this clip came from, check the link below. Please like and subscribe. And hit that little bell, too. That does some magical stuff. Thanks, guys.